we're going to be talking about is very, very crucial when it comes to preparing family enterprises for what lies ahead in the years to come in terms of uncertainty, economic sort of like downturns and upturns, hopefully as well at some point. And we are going to be talking about family business boards. And I think this is such an exciting topic, but maybe like just for context, because I did like to drop your title here at the beginning of the conversation because I have to say it's very rare that we get a chairman of the board to talk about this kind of stuff because, of course, we know how busy you are with actually practicing what you preach. But maybe a little bit more about how you came to take such a deep interest in this topic, and maybe you can give us some context as well from the background in terms of like how your own journey brought you to this position in your family enterprise.
So I went off and got into a big five consulting firm and, loved that work. And while I was there, happened to have met my husband. We got married, we got pregnant. And as I was really kind of going through all those life stages, I realized that there was nobody in this consulting firm, no women between the ages of like 30 and 45. We were on the road every week, different location, long hours, and of course didn't really see how I could actually see my children and also, do this job, which I did love. So I ended up deciding to take a year off and, stay home with my son for the first year, which I was very excited to do. And I got a phone call from my father, who was chairman of the board at the time. And he said, well, can you just help us work on this project? We're trying to figure out how to do this transition between the third generation to the fourth generation. We know it's going to be different since we know we're not going to have, a family member executive in the corner office. And I said, sure, hey, no problem. I have time. I had a 3-week-old. So of course I had like acres of time. Had he called me like, 3 months later, I would have said under no circumstances do I have time for this. Then kind of within a few years of that, our outside CEO, so my father was chairman, but we had a non-family CEO, approached me. I worked very closely with him as a family liaison and family council chair. And so he said, I think you'd be a great chairman. And it was really because of him that I was ever really, I think, considered. Had it really just been up to the existing board or to my family or my father, I don't think I would be where I am today. But you took kind of that third party outside perspective to really say, hey, I think you have the talent and expertise. And then he said, and of course, you're going to have to earn it. I was named chairman. So the company's 106 years old, 107 years old. And, there is that kind of pressure of legacy. It's like, oh my God, I hope it doesn't, like, I don't mess it up
Of
or it
course.
doesn't get messed up during my tenure. Like, I have one job, just keep the wheels on the bus. And then the pandemic hit, and it's like, I really have no idea what I'm doing. Like, this
Yeah.
is so much more. And by the way, I had a brand new CEO. He'd never been CEO before. He was in 6 months. I was brand new, and I had a very challenging board. I had a board that I inherited directors who my father put on the board. I inherited directors that the previous chairman had put on the board. And they just weren't really, they did not have the attributes that I needed to work with them. And they
Mhm.
didn't have the attributes that we needed to do the work of, the board
Mm.
during a global pandemic. A lot of them were on, many other boards who were also have in high, demanding their time. And it was pretty shocking to see just some of the attitudes and perspectives and pushback I got, even just trying to do really simple things like meat.
Do you think it was actually the pre-existing dynamics of the board before you joined, or do you feel like it was really exacerbated by circumstances?
I think the dynamics existed before, but I think it just had to do with the leadership difference between, how what I think a board should do and what the previous CEO slash chairman thought needed to be done. And I really
Hmm.
believe that directors are there to serve, not be served. There was a gap between my father being chairman and me being chairman, and so with the man who was chairman was also CEO between the two of us. And he held that role for about 8 years. And that is something in my situation I would never go back to, because our CEO chairman did not really like feedback from the board. So, of course, he's
Mm.
choosing directors and setting director expectations to not really give him very much feedback.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of board I want to execute on. I really feel like I want our board to be very much involved with oversight and to be able to provide real and constructive feedback to the CEO and the rest of the management team, as well as, deeply understand the family's expectations and values.
In your experience, like, or what are you also proactively doing now to safeguard your board, or what should family enterprises do to safeguard their boards from, I guess, like taking the wrong decisions or giving in to sort of like maybe like, some of the more negative dynamics in times of high pressure?
There's a couple conversations we've had both in the family and the board. In the family, it's really focused on investing and addressing any issues that are out there as they come up so that they don't kind of fester and create
Mhm.
problems. The fourth generation, my generation, actually has been working with a licensed family business therapist to try to address some of the generational dynamics that have existed in our family, just so that, and that's, and we didn't mean to start it during the pandemic. We had planned it and it just started during the
Yeah.
pandemic. And that was a very difficult project. And, we're still working with the therapist, but it has armed us and actually, I think, gotten us through some of the more challenging dynamics probably faster. There's a lot more alignment and there's a lot more dialogue, and a lot of people from that group have gotten a lot more active because of this. They didn't realize their voice mattered, even though we only said it 1,000 times. And so that's just, part of their, whatever. We have this dynamic. And so it's been really helpful to have them involved in the dialogue because it takes the pressure off the leaders to try to fix
Mhm.
the problem.
There's a few things that you said that I find very interesting. Like, first of all, I love how you describe the work that the family has had to put in, right? Like, and I think, what's so incredible about that kind of work is that unless you've actually done it or are doing it, it is very hard to convince other people of the actual benefit of these kinds of things, right? Like, because it sounds hard because it is hard. This is very, very hard work and it's super disagreeable. And it feels like you're basically taking everything, like there's no carpet anymore. Everything is exposed, right? Like there's nothing to sweep stuff under anymore. But it is insanely beneficial, right? Like, especially in times of volatility when there's some sort of unity on that side. And I think this is so powerful that you're confirming that. But I think it's hard for families to do, right? Because it feels almost like raking up unnecessary conflict. Like, why are you bringing this up? Like, we have Thanksgiving around the corner. You have all these articles coming up with, like, what not to say at the Thanksgiving table, right? Like, and it's just really interesting how this kind of proactive approach, I think, is so undervalued, right? Like, instead of waiting until the situation escalates to actually try to take steps before.
Something came to mind as you were saying that, and that is every generation, I think, has a responsibility to do everything they possibly can to make their lives better, emotional lives even better for the next generation. And what's interesting about having to have done this work in the fourth generation is that the first, second, and third generation didn't do any work. They did nothing. And there
Okay.
was so fewer of them. I mean, there's seven third generation family members. There's 20 of us.
Yeah.
And yet I'm dealing with emotional and system dynamics that started in the second generation that now, I'm holding the bag for as a family leader, that had they taken the time to do the work then,
Yeah.
it would be so much better for the rest of us. And that's what's so noble about my generation. I give them tons of credit for taking this on. A lot of this was not their stuff. This was what was, passed
But
along.
it's so typical for family generations to only consider the legacy as what is materially left behind and to forget that you leave that whole emotional baggage with whoever's shoulders are there to put it on. And it's just like so crazy that it takes so much to convince people that it's worth investing in these things at the time when you're still alive, when you're still around, when you can still do something about it. I love that you brought that up. I think so important. And then to your other point about sort of like, I guess, like, adding also fresh blood to the board. And I think this is so interesting that you're doing this now. How does that work for you in terms of like, when is the right time, good times to sort of like bring in new blood?
I think it's you really have to know what your expectations are, what you're trying to get out of the board, and that you want to set up your board composition to execute on that. So, for me, I felt that the existing board we had wasn't delivering and executing on those goals. And so that's when we started making changes. And as we brought in new directors, is when we really found the magic in bringing in new and outside perspective. So I think people are very hesitant. That kind of my sense is people are hesitant to make changes in their boardroom. They'd rather wait out a low performer, wait for them to term out rather than to make a move. But my sense, my kind of advice to anybody who has a low or non-performer in their boardroom is move them out faster. You will be shocked at the value and insights, enthusiasm, expertise, and curiosity that will come into your room because of it.
Ambition versus reality. How does it feel today to you? Like, do you feel you're growing into becoming the kind of chairman you want to be? Or like, is it so different from what you expected that comparison it doesn't matter?
So I would say I did not understand or have an appreciation for how complex it is to be board chair. It's not setting four agendas year and showing up. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background to make sure that you're putting the right agenda together, you have the right people at the table. In our last board search, we added two women to the board, which was the first female outside directors we've ever had. And I realized in speaking with one of them that one of them was having a really hard time getting into the conversation. And that was on me. That's, my work I need to do as a facilitator, and my work I need to do to make sure that everybody feels like they have a place at the table and that they're all included. And so, I just feel like I keep learning more and more as we go around, what makes a great board, what makes a great board meeting. There's still a lot of, I mentioned, we implemented a lot of changes when I came in. There's still kind of a long list of things we have to do. And then, I believe in governance, like once you have it perfect, you probably need to look at it all again. And it becomes a very iterative cycle. So I don't feel like, the job will ever be done. I'll certainly feel more comfortable in it. And one of the things that I did to try to help myself, just because, as you mentioned, I have terrible timing, and also I was running into enough problems in my own boardroom that I felt like, I needed to speak with other people in this role. And so I ended up accidentally, I thought I was starting a quarterly Zoom call with two or three other female board chairs, and ended up with a international group of women who now, meet, 10 or 12 times a year, and who are all board chairs. And, it got so complex that I ended up having to hire
Accidentally.
somebody.
We
Yeah.
like, I feel like we need to have a whole separate, like, sort of like podcast about how to manage time and to say no and that kind of thing with you,
But
Megan. So,
it has made me such a better board chair to
yeah.
learn from these other women, and who are, they've been in the role way longer than me. They've seen it all. They've dealt with, activist investors or challenging directors, or, they'll have a great recommendation on, hey, you should try X or Y. And it's really accelerated my growth, and also, growth as chairman, and then also has really provided that kind of support when, things start going really wrong, and you're like, okay, is it me?
Yeah.
What do I need to learn? And I feel like it's okay to have enough to self-examine. I'm not saying I don't have like infinite self-doubt, but to just say like, what else could I be doing differently is still a really healthy question. And that has been really, really helpful in starting this group.